Neoliberalism, the problem that's impacting all of us. What's going on?
Well, so to no one's surprise, as Paul is always keen to point out, there be a lot of riots and such happening all over the planet, and no one be talking about them. Do I have that about right, Paul?
Yep, that's my general sentiments.
Okay.
We will talk about more of them soon.
Okay, great. So this is a story on that. So someone keeps knocking at the door. It's cold out there and getting colder, but people inside are cozy on the sofa with the TV on and the blanket on their laps. But there's that knock again. At the front window now, then the side door, then maybe the back. Maybe it's the wind. Now there's knocking at the windows, on the roof, and on the walls of the house. Who knew they were so thin? It's hard to understand. How could so many people be knocking all at once? But they are, and it's getting louder. Last week you could hear the banging in Colombia, in Bogota, Cali, Medellin. I can't pronounce a few of these, so I'm just going to go through them. A curfew declared, the army in the streets. And the weeks before that, in Iran, a steady beat that quickly spread to more than 100 cities. At least 100 protesters have been killed so far. It's hard to know if there were more or exactly what's going on. The government shut off the internet on the protesters' second day. But even when there's steady connection, it's hard to put it all together. Protests have been rolling through Algeria, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Egypt, France, Germany, Guinea, Haiti, Honduras, Hong Kong, India, Indonesia, Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, the Netherlands, Spain, Sudan, the UK, and Zimbabwe. I would add in the US, but that's just me. I'm sure I'm leaving someplace out, and that's only since September. Some have been fleeting, routine sort that snarls up traffic for a day. Other have been more like revolutions, big enough to topple governments, shut down entire nations. Someone is here, but what? And why now? In the last 12 weeks, protests have spanned 5 continents. So guys, the world's fine. Nothing's going wrong. Nothing's collapsing. The world order set in motion since World War II by the U.S. of unfettered free capitalism, of resource-rich countries being pilfered and having that sent to your developed nations, your Americas, your EU, your now China, growing India. It seems like the system that we have developed, not we, I should say, but has been developed that we live in, is failing us everywhere at the same time. And I don't hear about that from MSDNC, don't hear about it from CNN, don't hear about it from BBC. I don't hear about this ongoing and continuous roiling collapse or act of collapse, but it doesn't seem like the world is healthy. Guys, what do you think?
Well, okay. See, again, this goes to the problem what neoliberalism does. Neoliberalism only advances the top 1%. The banks, the corporations, Wall Street executives, those who have power, the political establishment, the corporate media establishment. Neoliberalism is holding people back. And at the end of the day, we as citizens are constantly chained up. And so here, I also got a super chat. Mad Wolf, thank you. If you piss Biden off, he'll tell you to vote for another. Yeah, that's probably true. And Biden is
definitely true. Yeah. We showed that video on the show.
We showed that video. And not to mention, just while we're talking about people like Biden, Biden is a neoliberal. He helped establish this neoliberal system. And the thing is, under neoliberalism, working class families all across the planet cannot advance because it only favors to those who already have power. And because of this, the rest of us are left cannibalizing the remnants, the crumbs that the establishment is giving us. And this is why there's so many protests. This is why people are upset with somebody like Biden or Hillary Clinton or even Trump, because this is an establishment system that only caters to the needs of the top 1%, all while ignoring our crumbling infrastructure, turning a blind eye to climate change, saying that we can't afford Medicare for all, saying that we cannot have affordable education. I mean, this is neoliberalism at its core. And the people who they have, they're little puppet masters in the Republican and Democratic establishment, continue to play this back and forth game saying like, oh, we have a better idea for America, or our version's a better idea for America. At the end of the day, they are all friends with each other. And again, seeing all these protests and people actually getting change to happen or actually stepping up tells me that we here in the United States need to step up our game as well, respectively. Paul.
So when we talk about protests that erupt globally, right, in foreign countries, one of the things that I am always thinking about is, okay, what are we hearing about these protests? Who is telling us these things? And what is it that they would like, and what would the U.S. government like the opinions of everyday citizens in America to be about any particular protest? And by my estimation, it's not hard to discern that. Which protests are being talked about more than others? In what light? What is the slant on it? What is the perspective being given? And I've mentioned on the show repeatedly, we don't hear a lot about the protest in Baghdad. We don't hear a lot about the protests that happen in Bolivia or in Lebanon, right? You know, we hear about Hong Kong, hear about those Hong Kong protests a lot. And I think even from very, very early on, I remember going, okay, I don't know what it is, but something smells fishy about this. Man, this kind of like very Western-centric philosophy, right? This sort of pro-democracy, self-determination, no taxation without representation type, protest is so ubiquitous. But then you look at the inciting offense of it being like kind of wonky and minutia laden. And you're like, how is it that there's such wide support for this? And why is it that it's the only one that we want to talk about on the mainstream news? And my point is, maybe in retrospect, people will say, yes, this appears to have been a nefarious thing, that the United States was trying to get in on this. So it's something like the Hong Kong Democracy Act of 2019 that passed in the House and Senate. I think there were two different acts along those lines that essentially are like, we stand with the people of Hong Kong and we're pro-democracy and they should have self-determination. And the way that we want to show that legally is by making sure that Hong Kong is acquiescent to the United States' geopolitical demands, i.e. they obey our sanctions, right? We definitely don't want them, trading with Iran or with Venezuela. We definitely want to make sure that they end up not, getting cheap, not tariffed devices coming out of China that they can sell onto different markets. That's not a thing we want. We want to make sure that our trade policies are what's upheld, because that's the thing that will really bring democracy and self-determination to the people of Hong Kong. So that's a weird one. And my point of it is important what the American citizens actually think. They don't want people like Medea Benjamin, right, jumping up on stage and saying, the world wants us to stay in the Iran nuclear deal. This is important. We should not be allies with Saudi Arabia. She's just an absolute hero when it comes to activism in a sort of pro-peace, anti-war stance. And the United States government does not like that. And the more you can shape the opinions of people in the United States, the more people will acquiesce when we determine that, hey, that government leader that we've been telling you repeatedly over and over again is a dictator and you should hate him. We want to go bomb there now. You guys okay with that? Cool. Nobody's objecting to the fact that we're going to go bomb the guy that we've been telling you for years is a dictator and is evil, and you need to believe that he's evil, because if you don't believe he's evil, you're not going to be so cool when I go, hey, I want to go bomb this guy. And why would we do that? You end up with more Medea Benjamins. You end up with more people who occupy the embassy in Venezuela and say, no, you are not allowed to give this to someone who has declared themselves president and is actively trying to commit a coup.
Yeah. And see, again, it leads us to endless wars. And time again, we're seeing this crisis happen, and we got to make it stop, man. So,
yeah.